I just want to say it does feel good, doesn't it?
Yes, it's been so long. I can't believe it's been over a year.
We were trying to. Our chronicler Rock was telling us that we actually did a show in 2022. I think we did it in January, and then that was it. That's all we did right there, right? And then I got to turn my sound down.
Dear.
That's my sound of my thing. But so it does feel good. There we are. So we're now on YouTube. The show started at 5:15. Yet it did start, Matt, because we're trying to get our stuff together. I had to figure out what plugged in where. I have an iPad circa 1922. I had to get that going because it's the only thing that has all my music on it.
Right.
Only to find out I can't use that music because it's been banned because it's not royalty free. But it's all good. It's all good.
We did it. We made it.
There's just so much. There's like so much happened in a year that I feel like again like I'm a mosquito at a nudist colony. I don't know where to begin.
Right.
There's just a lot to focus. Yeah, Rock. So there's not. There's a lot to have happened. So I haven't really. Rock and I've talked, but I haven't really. I know that I kind of tuned in a little bit, came in a couple times near the election, around the election.
Yeah.
And here, obviously, for BARP, which if anybody who was here, it was great to have you guys and see you here. I think every year has gotten better. Anna,
Sure
your
has.
thoughts?
I 100% agree.
I think it's just one of those
Bigger,
things.
better. We fine tune it. This year, we added the music element, which last year was lacking. Because it was a party, but there was no background music. And this year, with the music, it really helped. The food was great. There was more people. Fire pits. Thank you for the tent and the table and the chairs. It was a blast. So
well, I think that it has gotten to the point where people kind of know what to expect as far as how it's going to roll the whole weekend.
Mm-hmm.
You also have seen where people have come. You've live streamed enough of it for people to understand what it's about. A lot of people I spoke to this year was their first year, and they were kind of not sure what to expect. And I think they were kind of blown away because there's such this sort of open arms, if you've been a listener for a period of time, that you're so welcomed, and there's like no masks. I mean, everybody's who they are. And, if Big Gulp is shows up with Scout. I mean, everybody's welcome. I mean, and it's just so interesting in the way that it is. And it's a lot of these people have known each other on chat for years. They've known each other from calling in, but when they see each other in the flesh, they're like, wow, it's great. The thing that's a little strange for me, and Rock, you need to come one year, because what's interesting is when you show up, everybody says, hi, I'm Bill or Smith. And then you go, oh, okay. And I'm Grouper Lips, or I'm, they give you their chat name. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, okay. It's Dark Mac Steve. It's,
right.
It's like, okay. But it's all that stuff is great because then you're trying to put it all together. Then it all makes sense to you. So I think it's good. And Anna, you've kind of been here since the first year was when you were here, right?
The first year was when I was here?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have one before you were here, correct?
No, they did. I think they had two before me.
I know, but they were kind of, I don't say lame, but they were not the same.
I mean, that would make sense, but yeah, there were definitely BARPs before my time.
It makes sense because you weren't involved, right?
Correct.
But that makes sense.
That it wasn't as good until I got involved. That makes sense to me.
You were like the added ingredient to make the perfect sauce, right?
Thank you. Yes,
well,
I
it's
agree.
true. It's true. I mean, they tried a lot of other stuff that didn't seem to work, and finally it gelled.
Yeah.
I would tell you, it's kind of weird to be not on, the normal Twitch to see it on YouTube. And are you watching the YouTube too?
I am.
Right. It's
a little delayed, a little bit more delayed.
It's a little delayed. It's just different than being a Twitch feel. And we're in the penalty box for how long on Twitch?
I think about one more week.
One more week.
Maybe four business days away.
You missed the bits that they used to call
Yeah, you can do super chat here. People can still donate. But yeah, the Twitch interface is kind of like, it feels like home.
Because you're used to it.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Of course, I want to remind everybody, if you are in the state of Florida, if you are close to the state of Florida, if you plan on being in the state of Florida, we are literally days away. We're in a leprechaun countdown to my St. Patrick's Day party, and I'm hoping this year. And I've looked ahead at the calendar. It doesn't look like we're gonna get the Arctic blast that we got last year. Last year it was freezing. Do you remember that, Anna?
Oh, I do. The wind was strong, I believe.
It was so cold, and it was uncharacteristically cold, and it was just that was the coldest one we've ever had. I don't know. It was like in the 50s. I mean, it was like people were like shivering. It just wasn't the same because we've had a lot of years where it's like a perfect spring night where it's in the 70s. It's supposed to be this year 72, which would be perfect if that holds. It's kind of early to tell, but it's supposed to be 72, no rain, no cold front. So if that holds, it will be great.
Starting at 5 p.m.
Starting at 5 p.m. because we were one day away from daylight savings time.
Okay.
Because last year we started at 6 because we were in daylight savings time. So we spring forward the next day. So it will be the same as a 6 o'clock start, just a day earlier, as far as look and feel.
Not a big fan of the spring forward, fall back deal.
We just need to get something and stick with it, right?
I think so. I don't think it's good for humans. Every study I've looked at says this is not good for anybody. All the changes, especially when we spring forward. I think heart attacks increase because people get less sleep, and it just really puts a lot of people who were on the edge over the edge, and then people die. So
it's
not good.
You're saying the time change kills people.
Yeah. Yes, I'm saying that because it messes with your circadian rhythm.
Of course.
And that's not good for anybody's health. I don't think so.
It's so interesting. And if you look back, and I'm going to make a really weird analogy. Remember, like Brussels sprouts went from nothing to now they're like the go-to on every item at every restaurant you go to.
Do I remember when they were nothing?
Well, when they were like, you would walk
It was like a gross thing as a child to eat.
That's my point. I mean,
yeah.
Brussels sprouts, you would never see it at a trendy restaurant.
Okay.
That's my point. I mean, Brussels sprouts were like pine nuts of 2010.
Right.
When pine nuts became the thing. So if you're a culinary person, all of a sudden, I'm like, where the heck where did Brussels sprouts come from? They're on every menu. Brussels sprouts, and I was going to give you a great analogy. Oh, I don't want to tell you, is that coming forward, and the thing that I've read a lot about, and I always read, and I listen to things, and I'm reading articles and health issues. One of the things I've seen on your sleep issue is that in the last 3 years, for the first time in my life, it's been bombarding with, if you want to slow down aging, if you want to stay healthy, if you want to reduce your body fat, is the 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah, you know what I've seen lately?
What's that?
Scout and Big Gulp. $10 on Super Chat. Love you, Kevin. And love Missy, too. Great seeing you at Barb.
That's awesome. Thank you, guys. That's great. Mm-hmm. And you missed that. I was saying earlier. You miss seeing them, but it's always nice to know you're going to see them every year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Missy's going to put something together for you guys, too. So don't forget that, Scout and Big Gulp, because she's going to do something for you guys on the tie issue. So a reminder there, because I remember that conversation. But on the sleep issue,
yeah.
Did you remember 10 years ago, I wasn't reading about 8 hours of sleep like I am right now? Consistently. Being you look at, for example, you look at the studies of, cold plunging, you look at the studies on saunas, you look at the studies.
Say it. My favorite one.
Which is?
Fasting.
It is.
Intermittently.
It's a big deal, isn't it?
It's a huge deal.
And you look at those things that no one was talking about, certainly in the 80s when we went fat-free. And now, they're talking about that. So,
yeah,
never before has there been an issue where you're so focused on getting 8 hours of sleep.
Well, do you feel like it was kind of the case where people would brag about how productive they were and how little sleep they got? Like,
yes.
Oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep. I've been up since 5, and I worked out, and I took care of the kids, and I did a full day of work, and then I worked out again, and then I did this, and then I worked on my side hustle. And you're just like, geez, people were like shamed for getting a significant amount of sleep. It was like you were lazy or something.
You're some sort of wimp. You're soft.
Right.
And now it's like turned into the thing where you got to do.
Yeah, people prioritize it way more than they used to. I know that for sure.
But I don't know where I got on that. But I know like sleep's a deal. But I mean, because I find myself constantly going, how are you going to tweak your life? How do you make your life better? What are the things that you need to do to put yourself in a better position so you are being productive and trying to do the things that make sense for you? And one of the things was sleep. And I didn't really, I want to say it wasn't my radar, because when you've got a young family and people who listen to the channel, they're cranking, whether they're driving on the road, or they're raising 2 or 3 kids, or they're working on their main job, their side hustle, and trying to make sure everything gets done sometimes the things that you put on the back burner is, I'm okay with 5 hours sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Peter Thiel who was on Rogan, and he was asking the question, what a percentage of the people that are really productive on their game at 5 hours sleep? He goes, great, I'll give you the exact percentage. And Rogan goes, that's awesome. What's the percentage? He goes, 0.
Yeah.
I'm like, that makes sense, which is just not there. But so that's kind of focus on sleep, not being lazy, whatever. But Rocker, you're a big sleeper, aren't you?
I try to be, but lately I haven't. I mean, between the work you got me doing and the work I got other people doing and the work my other job got me doing, and I'm trying new things, I've barely got any sleep. And
What's
sometimes
barely?
I just wake up at 6 o'clock just ready to rock and roll, even though I don't need to be up, like hours later. So I'm like, I can't sleep, so I just get up and just do something productive.
Like on average, how much are you getting?
About 6.
Okay.
You need to get 8.
I need to get 8.
You need to get 8. You really do.
I almost. I don't know.
What? Where are you on?
Probably about 6.
Yeah, you got.
Yeah.
You
But
got,
and here's the thing, Kevin. Like I know what I should be doing, and I'm so disciplined in pretty much every aspect of my life except going to bed on time, which is odd.
well, you're trying to prioritize. One thing that I've not segued to, which I need to do, which I've had difficulty doing, is and I think you do it, which is and I talked a couple years ago about atomic habits, which are putting together a set of things you do every day that you do without thinking about it, that become rote, that are super productive and causing you to go in the right direction in your life. For example, the sleep's number 1. Number 2
is Tina Bacon's Revenge. $20 on the super chat. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. But the other thing that you need to put in there, of course, and I read a great article the other day that talked about, I think it was the 12, 10, 8, 4, 1 rule. 12, 8.
Whoa. That's kind of hard to remember.
I know. I'm trying to remember it. It was 12, 10, 8, 4, 1. That's what it was. And I'm like going, okay, I got to remember this acronym. So it was the 8 hours was the 8 hours of sleep.
Right. What's 12?
The 12 was that you have to consume 12. You take your weight and you
Okay.
multiply it by 12,
Hold on.
and that's the calories that you are to intake in a day.
Hold on. Stand by.
People are going to do some math there, but go ahead.
I'm doing some math. Times
Rock with-
12.
Times 12. That's your calories.
It
You're going to say it's low, right?
is low, but I also probably don't eat as much as I used to, so that may be about right.
But it depends.
Right.
And it depends where you're putting your calories too. I mean, if you put your calories in liquid drinks, that's tough to get there. You have to save it for stuff. So it's 12. Take your weight, multiply by 12. That's the calories per day. 10 is the 10,000 steps. So you got to move.
Mm-hmm.
The 8 is 8 hours of sleep. The 4 is 4 times a week in the gym during strength training or weight training or isometrics.
Okay.
And the 1 is 1 gram of protein per your
Pound
weight.
of body
Yeah,
weight.
yeah, exactly. And that's been tough. That's
And you've been doing all those things?
well,
He chuckles.
I chuckle. I mean, I'm doing the 12. I'm doing the 10 on a lot of days. I'm doing the 8 consistently. The 4 I'm doing consistently. The 1 I've had to, because I'm trying to be a creature of habit, I had to go and get, I forget what kind of protein shakes. I'm doing I forget what it's called, common core something. It has 42 grams of protein in it. I have to do a shake like that to get me there because I can't do it with food.
You can't do it with food?
I can't get there. I mean that's a lot. I mean, I'm eating 2 chicken breasts every lunch, like with a salad.
I don't think you need as much protein as you think you do.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I don't know if I'm the person to give advice on that.
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. I consume a lot of stuff on like fitness, nutrition,
Sure.
Anything that comes to like creating gains or maintaining gains. And they push protein, and you certainly should have a significant amount of protein, but I don't think you need as much as they keep pushing.
Well, the good news is they can push it. I just can't get there.
Yeah, but I mean, you're pushing it through other means. Like if you can't get it through Whole Foods, you're trying to drink it with a protein drink.
Sure.
Do you feel any better? Like
You know what it does? So here's where I feel better. And one of the one of the biggest problems I've had is a problem my cars I've had over the year, the steering problems. And about 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, it's a weird thing. After like 8, I develop steering problems because they want to steer me to a Baskin Robbins.
Oh, no.
That's what I'm saying. It's horrible.
Is it a Rivian thing?
It's a Rivian thing. The day I'm going to charge for photographs with a Rivian. By God, it's going to happen. In fact, I've scheduled my meeting to take delivery, which could be anywhere. They're telling me from 2 weeks to forever. And listen, I understand Thomas, Doubting Thomas, as Rock looks at me, that it may not, that you think it's not going to happen. When it happens, by golly, there'll be. And I'm going to go out there and I'm going to race everybody on the highway.
Okay.
At 0 to 60 in
Right.
0.029 seconds, whatever it is. So, I mean, right now it's like they're like, you got to be kidding me, Don Quixote.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Now, I mean, you've been talking about the Rivian for a while, but with
Okay, but listen, I can't control. I can't build it. It's not like clay. I can mold with my hands.
But with all the
like an erector set.
But with all the new electric trucks are coming onto the market,
It's
the
electric.
Silverado,
Yes.
the GMC,
Yes.
all of that. Do you still want the Rivian? Are you still in preference of the Rivian over these other electric models?
Or you've just been talking about it for so long
Ford F-150 Lightning.
that you feel like you have to get it.
What's the what was that? What I was talking to you on about the
It's something about your son.
sunk cost.
Yeah, the sunk cost. Yeah.
Yes, but the sunk cost matrix
Fallacy?
The sunk cost fallacy, which is Rock. So you know, which is if you have spent all this time, which the argument would be, well, I've spent so much time trying to get this car, so I might as well because I'm invested. That's this fallacy because I should be able to pivot in a second without any emotion lost to go ahead and get a Ford Lightning. But the problem is at this point, I feel like I in order to save face, in order to keep
It's an ego thing.
For me, it's completely ego.
Yeah.
I want to be completely ego. I could care less right now if it's a hunk of junk. By golly, I'm going to get that Rivian. I'm going to drive it, and I'm going to all the way over here. I'm going to video it. I'm going to Snapchat it. I'm going to
You're going to Snapchat
I'm going
it.
to Snapchat. I'm going to Facebook it. I'm going to MySpace it. I don't care what it takes to get there. That's what I'm going to do because it will be one of the first, of the SUV ones here in the area. So yeah, I'm going to be, absolutely. I'm going to do it because I feel like I'm committed to it.
Now I squirreled you on the Baskin Robbins deal. You were about to tell us what your pitfall was.
The pitfall is when you consume a lot of protein, I stop having that craving.
Oh, so you don't go to Baskin
No, I
Robbins
don't.
anymore.
I know, no, but the reason I think is that like we go out to dinner and my wife goes, "You don't want dessert?" I'm like, "Nah, I'm good," which is like not typically me.
Right.
So I think
You're getting the orange crunch cake.
Oh God, that was great.
It was good.
That was really good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
There probably could be a replication at some point, right?
Right. Yeah.
Betty Crocker, come on, speak to me. Talk to me, Betty.
Yes.
Talk to me, Betty.
Yes. All right. She'll come back.
But I think so. I think the protein has helped.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I need before I because I don't have control of my own board, I'm just going to keep going. But and we're going to just go 2 hours or whatever it takes. People who are living on the chat right there, because we didn't know what we're doing. We're starting at 5, try to get our feel, get our mojo back.
Mm-hmm.
Big day today. I'm going to report a couple things. I just spoke to Duncan Punkin before I got in the air. Today is post night.
Post night?
Post night. P-O-S-T. P-O-S-T. Post night, where you're going to post. So those following the story of my boring life is that Duncan Punkin, who's a senior at West Point, graduates a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. They celebrate 100 night, which is one of the big 5 things they celebrate there, which is 100 nights before graduation. It's a big formal event, and they have all this going on. So they celebrate 100th night. That's happened. And tonight is post night, and he finds out where he will be posted. So he graduates May 27th.
Okay.
Which will be there. We'll be up there for 10 days. It's kind of like, some parties and this, that, and the other, some black tie events and whatnot. But what's interesting at West Point versus Naval Academy is West Point, at Naval Academy, there's more parties, and it's like 10 days of festivities, and the Blue Angels come, and there's this party and that party and this party and that party. You kind of go, and it's a lot of festivities. West Point is more like down to business, and it's like less that way. And like at Naval Academy, he graduated in the morning, and there were parties that night, and there was stuff the next day, and then people kind of go out and do their thing on Monday. West Point, you graduate, I think it's like 10 or 11 in the morning. By 2 o'clock, the place is a ghost town. They're like gone. People are just like, leave. Like there's like, no one's hanging around. No one's hanging around for this. They just leave. Because I go to Duncan, I go, what are you doing? He goes, no, Dad. After graduation, people go. A lot of people have to report the next day to do something because they start their job or they've got some leave they're taking. They're not hanging out at all there to say, it's been great and this has been awesome. They're just like gone. So, but tonight is post night where he finds out where he'll be posted. So when you graduate, depending on what you're going to do in the Army, you go to a school for about a year, and he's going to go to Fort Benning in Georgia for a year, and he's going to be a tank commander.
Wow.
So he will be in charge of either an Abrams or the other tank, which is, what's the other one's called? Blitz, you know what the other one is called? It's Abrams or, I'll think about it in a second. But that's the other, so he'll be in charge of one of those tanks, and with a crew, I think it's 4 or 5, and he'll have other folks to support him. So he goes down to Georgia for a year to kind of get up to speed, and then he'll find out tonight where he'll be posted for the remainder of those 4 years. During those 4 years, too, he'll probably have 1 or 2 deployments. Right now, a lot of those folks are going to Poland.
Huh? Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, right on the border of Ukraine. And then they might go to Taiwan.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Why do you think? Yeah, exactly. Of course, that's exactly why that is.
Did he have a say in picking and choosing what?
Yeah, you have some choices. He had some other things on his list. That I don't think that was in his top 3. I don't think he thought he was going to get it, but it's kind of the needs of the Army.
Okay.
Like at Naval Academy, which is weird, you could say, I really want to be a fighter pilot. I want to be an F-16 pilot. And if your grades are so-and-so and you're pretty high in your class, they go to, hey, Rock, good news. You're going to be a submarine captain. And you know what? I don't want to do subs. Yeah, you're going to be a submarine guy. and they call it being subdrafted. They give you $60,000 as a junior, but you're now going to go subs. And sometimes you don't have a choice. It's whatever the needs of the Army and the Navy at that time.
Have they accounted for his height being in the tank?
I don't know the answer to that. He's 6'6", almost 6'7". Duncan Punkin. I mean, I don't know how he's going to get in there. That's so small. He couldn't be a fighter pilot because he wouldn't do it. He could be a certain helo pilot, depending on what the model is and what the equipment is. But he has some restrictions on what he is going to do. But so tonight around 6:30, probably during the show, he'll text me and find out where he's going to go. I think we broke it down that it will probably be either Fort Hood or Fort Sill. We think.
I know Fort Hood.
I'm not Fort Sill. I mean Fort Hood or Fort Bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, did you say he was going to be in Georgia?
So he'll be Georgia for a year at Fort Benning.
Oh, 1 year.
For 1 year, which is it's in Columbus, Georgia.
That'll be right after he graduates.
He has 2 months off. He has 2 months to travel, do what he wants to do, unless they move him up, and then he'll be assigned to Fort Benning, which he's there for about a year.
And then after that, it's question mark.
Then we find out tonight he's there for the 4 years, and during those 4 years, there'll probably be 2 deployments out of the country somewhere.
Wow.
I remember I used to live in Fort Hood when I was a kid, and you used to hear the big explosions off in the distance, and I always just imagined those were tanks, just target practice.
Yeah. So, Hood is outside of Austin, and it's kind of cool because you're kind of near at least a big city, Austin. The other one is Bliss, is I think in San Antonio.
Okay.
I think it's what it's near. I'm not positive. People in the chat, if we were quick, they'd tell me, but we've got this delay, so I don't know the answer. But I think that's where he would be, during that time period. And it's a 5-year commitment, and then he can decide if he wants to keep going or not. And also during that time, he'll go get his Ranger tab, go to Ranger school, and become a Ranger, which is pretty, badass in itself.
I thought he was because he's got his major in physics, right? Like he wanted to be a physicist.
Physics and data science. I mean, he still wants to use that in some form, but I mean, I don't know how that's going to go when he's in the field or what he does. But I mean, that's his. He thought it was sometime doing kind of like cyber or those types of things. Mm-hmm. But he also the argument was, do you want to do something that might be an outside world thing, or do you want to do something that's real Army? When you think about like real Army, you think about like a tank, or you think about infantry, you think about the things that are like super, I don't want to say manly because of other things, but very unique Army.
Mm-hmm.
And like Parker, when he was at Navy, you know, he was on a destroyer for a while, which is very unique Navy. And I can't tell you where he is right now, but he's in Coronado, California. And he started last week.
Mm.
And
do you worry about your sons when it comes to stuff like that?
well, yeah, I mean, when you consider that what he signed up for
Mm-hmm.
will put him in the position of doing things that we don't talk about as a country,
Mm-hmm.
and going places that will deny that we're there.
Well, because I got
doing things that can't be repeated.
Because I got to figure. I mean, I remember way back when, you know, like you're wheeling and dealing, you know, trying to get these guys into West Point and Naval Academy. Did it not cross your mind that
that happens on the other side of the rainbow? And it's not much of a rainbow?
Yeah.
It's like a mortar shell that blast that went off?
Mm-hmm.
That? Well, of course. So I think it's, well, of course, but I think there's sort of a holistic approach, which is, what is your goal? You know, what is your goal? And my goal is, I think that, in my opinion, that I was blessed with having some hard-charging offspring that have had and shown throughout their life leadership potential. And if you were going to lead, whether it's a sixth grade class as a teacher, a principal, you know, whatever you want to call it, a CEO, if you want to be an entrepreneur and start your own company, whatever you're going to be, honing your leadership skills for that later life experience needs to come from somewhere. And where do you do that? I mean, there's certain colleges have leadership programs. A lot of schools have entrepreneurship programs. But if you do a deep dive into Fortune 500 companies, you look at the one thing that the CEOs and CFOs have in common is the largest percentage of those have gone to service academies. Mm. And you've done that because they provide leadership that you can't replicate in any other fashion. And you look at the people around the globe from other countries that send the folks that are going to be leaders of their countries, and many of them will send them to one of our service academies so they get that sort of leadership skill. So, I mean, that was my thought. Now, do you worry about your kids? Of course you worry about your kids. You worry about them, but the question is, do you coddle them? Do you keep them here in Pinellas County and, you know, hide them I mean, what do you do? I mean, the answer is, or do you have an idea that they can contribute to the greater good of a country that you believe in, right? But yeah, I mean, you're concerned.
A commenter said you can learn the leadership skills on the streets.
Like the Crips and the Bloods?
The Crips and the Bloods?
That's right. What set are you repping?
What set? What street? What hood you from?
What hood you from? We repping. Yeah, I guess there's an argument that can be learned on the streets. Sometimes I think the streets have no name. Can you call in still here?
Yes, and we actually have someone, a very special someone on the line that would like to talk with you today.
Awesome. What's going on?
Hey, Kevin. Big Gulp's dad, the Colonel.
It's Scout, by the way.
Oh, Scout. Thank you, Scout.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. He has six apartments on Coronado Island. Is your son looking for housing? Because one's becoming available in April.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, he is currently in Imperial Beach, and he is rooming with 4 other guys that are going through what he's going through right now too. But I need to connect with you because that's always great. But as you know, Coronado Beach is extremely expensive.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're 4 guys shoved into a 3-bedroom apartment trying to live on the BH that they give. But that, I think, as he goes to the next phase, that would probably be great because he's got to be, as you know, he's got to be there 18 months.
Right. Yeah, he's going to be there for a hot minute, and it's a beautiful place, and it's like a block from the Dell, her dad's apartment. So yeah, it's a beautiful spot there on the island. I mean, you can't beat it.
Well, we're going to go there, I think, in June. That's when he finishes first phase. So I will connect before we go out there and check it out because we got to figure out what he's going to do long term. Oh. But he's got to get by some of the stuff right now that he's into.
I'm just a step parent. Big Gulp came to the relationship with 2 kids, and there's no greater joy or pride than to see your kids soar. And yours are soaring.
Well, I really I appreciate it. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
But So you guys have a good show. I'm glad you guys are back. And, yeah, please, if there's anything we can cut it out. Big Bubba, she's laughing at me.
Oh. Yeah.
But, yeah, if you guys, when you head out that way, if you need anything, hit us up.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you, Scout.
All right,
Thank you, Big Gulp. Love you. Miss you.
They're the
Love you
best.
guys.
Bye.
They're the best.
Oh, they really are.
They're just really the best.
Yes, just salt of the earth. So sweet, so generous.
Part
and,
of the glue.
And the people that got married, Matt Hoxie and his wonderful new bride. It was really Scout and Big Gulp that kind of spearheaded the gift that was presented to the newlyweds, which I think ended up being in the ballpark of $600. I don't know, 400, something like that.
That's amazing.
That they went around and collected and then presented to them. So
What a great thing.
Yeah, it was great.
What a great thing. That's so cool. They're great. So I'm gonna obviously follow up with them because we're gonna go out there at the end of first phase, which will be June-ish.
Okay.
1st of July, we'll go out there. And now that's kind of honest country out there, right there. California,
Yes.
Cali.
Yep.
Those are your peeps?
San Diego. That's me.
Those are your people out there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know where Imperial Beach is?
I do. I believe it's a bit more south and inland
is.
from where I grew up. But yes, I'm familiar with Imperial Beach.
So it's just south of Coronado.
Mm-hmm.
Go across a bridge maybe to get to Coronado. So it's south. It's just that the real estate prices are a little cheaper
Yeah.
there.
You've been to Coronado?
I have, but it was years ago.
Okay.
I mean, it was
Same.
we were out there for the Super Bowl, which was
At Qualcomm?
at Qualcomm, which was like the last time I was in San Diego.
Okay.
We've been in LA. We've been obviously we were in wine country 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But that
French Laundry.
French Laundry. There
Like
we
Gavin
were.
Newsom.
We're just like Gavin Newsom, just like Gavin, but it was pre-pandemic, so
Right.
we were without face mask, and it was cool at the time because I wasn't preaching to put one on. What an interesting thing we've learned post-pandemic, right?
Yeah, it seems kind of like a pre and post 9/11 deal where you're like, oh, remember those days when things were just different? And, you think about all the knowledge you've acquired about medicine and viruses. And it's like, I never thought that I would know so much about something that originally I wasn't, that curious about. But, you kind of had to be to kind of navigate what was going on and what your stance was on certain things. So,
Well, but I think we're a little bit like Pete Townsend, where we want to sing together. We won't be fooled again, because I think that as a country or as a world, I don't think we're going to fall for the okie doke next time. You say no?
I don't know, Kevin. History tends to repeat itself.
It does, but
Maybe not exactly in the same form, but I feel like most people are
sheeple.
happily duped. Just listen, it's a lot easier to just kind of go along with the crowd. I think it's a lot easier to just do that and be able to live your life and kind of collect more freedoms by giving up other freedoms, if that makes sense.
It does.
So it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just get this thing so I can go back to work and just be able to go hang out with my friends at the club. So
it really was problematic because we talked about it here on the show, which is there was never a good delivery system of honest, vetted information. You know what I mean? There just wasn't. And then
you just didn't know where to get what. Like, everyone was an expert and everyone was saying something different, and it was just very confusing.
And the problem, if anybody said something that was out of line, they were shadow banned or banned by 28-year-olds sitting in a cubicle,
right?
Pulling levers to say we're not going to allow that. Which that we're going to have to, and we created this monster that we're going to have to put this genie back in the bottle. I kind of envision myself like this old 1970s Godzilla form out there with these social media giants that we've allowed to have way too much control on the way that people think. And we've got to find a way to rein that in, or there's got to be sort of a balancing test, because it's not good. And certainly I can see some of the unfettered freedom of speech in a lot of ways. Wild Wild West becomes problematic in that you can't have people saying, let's go lynch this person. I mean, obviously that makes, you don't want to do that. But on the flip side, you can't say, well, I've got a different opinion and not have that given equal an audience and let people decide for themselves. And, we've got to find a better way whether it's the folks at Google, the people on Facebook, the people on Twitter, whoever they is, we're going to have to find a way to keep them in check in such a way that either we take off the boundaries that they put on there, or there's got to be another delivery system or another mechanism that people can go to as an alternative universe to get that sort of information. And so far, we've allowed some of these people to be these behemoths that we can't control. And as you know, once you get large enough and you accumulate enough resources and you donate enough and you get certain people and groups on your side, that you become almost too big to fail and too big to bring down.
I think that, I mean, to that extent, I think maybe the problem is people are too quick to villainize the opposite, the opposition, the opposite opinion, because I think I would, like, when I hear what you're saying, I'm like, the problem was if you didn't agree with me, you're a bad person, and I think that was the biggest problem. Like, whether you're out and you're wearing a mask, and
Rock, I'm taking a step back from that. I'm talking about the fact that if Google or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or somebody else regulates your speech, and if you don't even have an opportunity to have a difference of an opinion, if you're a Stanford, MIT doc or scientist or engineer, or you're a biomedical and whatever, if your version of ivermectin or whatever you want to talk about gets banned because you can't speak about it, that's where I think the problem is. And I think that we've got to have a way to have that information shared without it being throttled back or banned altogether. And that was just one aspect, because in the middle of COVID, that was the issue, but it will be a different issue on a different day.
Well, I like to hear your opinion on this, because it's not like people who said something different about, at least in America, say, he said it had a different opinion about how to handle the virus, say. It's not like you went to jail for it. You were just maybe taken off of social media, Twitter, YouTube, whatever. Now, I'm not happy about that sort of thing either, but what about the people that say, hey, listen, like, Twitter is a private or was a private company, and they have a set of terms and conditions, and if you don't follow those rules, then you're going to get kicked off the site. So, you can go scream in the town square all you want, and you can have a sign and pick it outside of whatever public, courthouse or whatnot, but you can't be on our website saying things that we don't agree with because it, quote, violates our terms and conditions. What do you say to those people? Because listen, I'm kind of torn.
No. I like that. So,
yeah.
So you've raised the same issue with the same people that argue that, who tell me that Colin Kaepernick has a freedom of speech at an NFL event, which he does not. Because that is a private event by which the NFL determines their own rules, which they control what people do during their event that they own.
Yeah, and they allowed it to happen.
And they allowed it to happen. But my point is, the very people that make the argument, but Colin Kaepernick missed the boat that too is regulated. And there's that whoever those people are doing whatever they want at a college basketball game, pro basketball game, football game, whatever, there is no freedom of speech for people at a private event that is privately owned. Which is the same argument that you raise, which is Twitter has the right to regulate what people can say or do on their website.
Even if it's not, quote, fair, like, who cares? It's like it's their bakery, it's their website. If they want to serve certain people and not others.
No, I agree with you.
Okay.
And really, my argument is not that, because you're exactly right. They can. My argument is that we've allowed, in essence, a private entity.
Yeah.
To rise to the level of a public forum. And, with Twitter and Facebook and Google, which they're owned by private, it's obviously stock in Google, whatnot, but it is not a publicly held company.
No.
So they can make their own rules and decide who they want to give greater. I mean, they could arbitrarily tonight make a decision that my law practice will be on page 1 and only and that's the only thing you're going to see because that's their decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have to pay them $1 to do it because they could decide they want to do it themselves.
Right.
Or they could make a decision, which they did a lot of times in elections, that if you were a certain candidate of a certain party, your page, which you get collections from to monetize your campaign, will be on page 27.
So what is your remedy for this? You said sometimes they become so big that they become basically a public forum.
Yes.
So are you suggesting that the government go in and start regulating
Holly,
things?
You know, I mean, when you say it like that, but the problem, the same thing we had when you had the press. So go back to the 1940s or 50s,
right,
where you have a number of large papers
okay,
that control information. And anytime that you have a company that controls something, that creates an issue. And my argument is not so much that you need to have the government control Facebook or Google or YouTube or whatever it is. My argument is there needs to have enough competition by which there's alternative sources for those voices to be heard. Because if you just have them, this is really a monopoly argument.
mm-hmm.
If you have a monopoly on information, or the distributing information, you create a problem that they have too much control,
Mm-hmm.
and it's sort of an antitrust issue.
So, I have to say something. At what point do you put the onus on the people? Because I hear what you're saying. I don't think the social media platforms really is a monopoly, because there are other platforms and other avenues to get media and information. I think if people only rely, and they allow themselves to rely on just, Twitter or what CNN or Fox News is telling them, then yeah, it's like it's on you though. Like, at what point do we tell people, hey, if you allow yourself to be, fall for the same thing, it's not the government's fault. Like, you're an individual.
But what if you don't even know those other platforms are out there?
And you're not aware of anything alternatively, that there's an alternative truth.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I buy that. I think there's, I mean, it's sort of like history or any kind of religion, like you can do your due diligence. If something doesn't sit right with you, it's like, okay, this doesn't make sense.
But here's the problem. If that's all you hear, and I'm just making an argument, the propaganda is so loud, that's all you hear, and anything that's anti to that is shouted down as being a heretic, then it kind of creates this issue that the echo chamber that you're in is like-minded news sources, and I use the news sources parenthetically, and you're being Twitter, Google, Facebook, and then that's it. Then you're kind of in this echo chamber of the same thing, and you're not going to hear an alternative source. So you came back, and for example, they had a great study that was finally an independent study that got some traction that basically said that the masks were completely irrelevant and they did nothing. That was kind of like the conclusion, that they went and they did a really deep dive, and they even included the N95, by the way, but they're like going, from a viral standpoint, it literally made no difference. And you would never have heard that during the height of the pandemic, simply because you've been not allowed to have that information distributed. So my point is, is there a requirement to somehow prevent them from having corner the market on distributing information? And I think it becomes a problem when you have, where else you're going to get the information? If you want to find information, where are you going to find it?
I don't know. I think you would go straight to like the specific people who are in charge and ask them questions directly.
So how would you do that?
So say hey everyone, there's COVID. All right, I don't know what COVID is. I think, again, so my attitude way back when, because I don't want to get off the question, but like, because I hear you speak, and ever since day one, I remember I felt like with you, because, oh my God, people are going to die. I remember you were talking about millions, and for me, I'm like, no, I'm not really bothered by it. So it's like
you're great for the great cleansing.
I'm not that. I was like,
here comes the flood.
I'm like, this isn't really
I'm building an ark.
So even with the government putting restrictions, it's like I comply just because I'm like, I don't care one way or the other. Like, I'm living the quarantine life anyway. Like the way I live.
I'm living the quarantine life anyways. I like that.
So I'm like, it didn't bother me. So like, okay, whether or not this came from Wuhan or not, it's like,
you don't care.
I don't care.
Yeah, I
but
think
if it did hinder me, and it got to the point where I'm like, all right, this is preventing me from living the life the way I want, then yeah, I would go straight. I would definitely find the right people to talk to, or become an outlaw myself.
I know, but
Well, I think Rock might be ahead of the game because he probably already distrusted the institutions that many people do have faith in, namely, the government or the DOD or the FBI, the CIA. Like, you were already dubious of them. But for a lot of people, when the government or when the CIA or when the president would say something, they would believe it to be true. And, initially when all these, quote, conspiracy theories came out that there was a potential lab leak, like I remember when Mike Pompeo, suggested that all he said was, we can't close the door on this. And
he was a
he was a heretic. He was criticized as being a conspiracy theorist.
Yes,
and what was he, Secretary of State? Like,
Yes.
it's pretty high up there. And to be calling this guy like, he's going rogue, he's a conspiracy theorist. And now, not only is it considered, a possibility, but it's the probability that it was most definitely a lab leak. And now it's just like, oh, okay. But at this point, and we kind of talked about this on the main show, at this point, they're saying it at a time when like everyone's like, all right, well, it's in the past, I'm over it.
No
but at the time,
I know, no, it's like, but this is like everything we've seen that's been out there. Hands up, don't shoot. Well, that didn't happen that way. I think it's a lab leak. It actually was a lab. When you start unpacking it, but you're exactly right. Now that you're talking about it, no one cares about it.
Because everyone is just so fatigued by, is it this, is it that? It's like, all right, kind of like Rock said, like, we've moved on with our lives. And does it really change my life if it came from, a wet market, a pangolin or whatever, versus the Wuhan lab? No, but it just kind of makes me more aware that the things that come out of, the White House or any sort of government department or official is, you should keep your head on a swivel, and it's not probably, but there's a high likelihood that it's probably a lie or not the truth. So maybe it's not an intentional lie, but they don't always know what they're talking about, and you don't have to believe everything they say.
And when you go back, and from Russian election interference, hands up, don't shoot, came from a bat. I mean, but
I did learn what a pangolin was, so I guess there's something there.
but it's the Spanish American War. You had the newspapers who basically instigated that. I think during Teddy Roosevelt or before his time, and it's like when you see this play out in history, that's why I'm like, the onus is on the people to educate themselves. Like, I don't know, maybe the school system.
But here's the problem. I hear what you're saying, and Anna, I want your opinion on this.
Sure.
I appreciate that it's up to individuals to educate themselves, but tell me how. And that's because. But hold on a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Because my argument is under the current what we had in place at the time, meaning the resources that the average American had at the time, their ability to educate themselves was limited because the vehicles that they would use for education were propaganda machines, and anything outside of that norm was shadow banned or prevented the average person from consuming accurate alternative information. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, Rock, you follow me?
No.
Okay. So you're John Q. Public.
Okay.
And let's use the bat theory. Okay? You're trying to figure out as an independent individual how it is this whole thing started.
Mm-hmm.
Does it matter? Not really, but you want to know why.
Why do you want to know why?
Because you're a curious person.
You're a curious person. I'm using an example. I'm using your example saying that you want to do your independent information and find out.
If it hindered me. Like you say I can't go from point A to point B and I need to get fish from point B. I'm like, okay, well, I need to get to point B or my family's going to starve. So
but who are you going to find out whether it came from a bat, whether or not it was a lab leak? Who are you going to talk to?
Honestly, like, so say we take your premise and you don't know who to talk to.
No, but I'm going to use yours. Who are you going to talk to?
If I'm saying if I'm taking all right, so you take mine and I'm like, okay, I don't know who to talk to, but I still need to get to point B. I'm just going to go to point B. And if whatever happens, I just deal with it.
You lost me.
All right. So say I need to go to point B to get fish to feed my family. People are saying, hey, don't go to point B because there's a mysterious virus out there that might kill you. Okay, well, what kind of virus? And everyone's giving me answers, and it just doesn't make sense. And it's stopping my family because I still need to get fish. I'm going to go to point B at the risk of this virus because, one, either I don't believe it, or two, we're going to starve anyway. So it's like you're just making that choice. And I think that when you do take that journey and you do take that choice, you're going to get answers along the way. Either you're going to get sick, so you're going to have to deal with it. And I think that's where people are getting mad. They were like, oh, well, see, now you got to fill up the hospitals, but
answer my question.
Okay.
Where are you getting this information from? Because you said I would find out from people that had information or sources.
Right, because people are going to try to stop you, right? So say if I'm trying to go to point B and someone says, hey, you can't do that. That person probably has answers. Ask him questions. Okay, where'd you hear it from? Let's ask him. Okay, where'd you hear it from? Do you see? Or is that...
I would probably say if you were to ask me that question, the best that I can do is someone who, I'm never going to know with 100% certainty pretty much anything, right? And I've taken that as just a given. Like, and I always say if I'm quote 100% sure on something, I'll always say like 99.9%. Like I always give myself just that window. But I try to just triangulate my sources, right? So I kind of look at people who I look up to as thought leaders, and I think that I trust their judgment because I've trusted their judgment on, say, issues prior. I kind of align with their stances in terms of like
they've turned out to be accurate.
Yeah, or they're like rational thinkers, or they appear to at least hide their biases. They're not openly like, I'm a Democrat and I think this way and the Republicans are terrible. I like people who don't really belong to a party or a side. And so I kind of look at them. And then also I try to look at, maybe people who are resident experts, especially when it comes to things I'm not an expert in, like medicine or law or something like that. But the problem with all of this, Kevin, is that it takes so much time.
I know.
To try to triangulate sources and try to say, okay, well, it seems like CNN is kind of moving in this direction. Fox is kind of moving in this direction. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And most people don't have that kind of time like I have that kind of time. And also most people just aren't as curious as, maybe the three of us are. So.
Yeah, but I go back to say, let's use a theory or the goal here is to find out the origin of the virus. You doing it on your own, using what was available to you at the time, would lead you, unfortunately, towards a bat theory versus a leaked lab theory. And you would find at the time you're doing your investigation, little evidence to support the leaked lab theory. And the people that would be proposing that would be the flat earthers kind of in the world.
Right.
So, I mean, that's my point is that A, it'd be hard for you to find it. B, when you found those people, they'd be mocked for their viewpoint.
Right.
Because they're still trying to shove down this bat theory to everybody. And I'm saying to Rock, it'd be hard to find the independent person. I can't go to Wuhan and interview the guy who works at the lab. I can't go to Wuhan and said, were you the guy that ate the bat? I mean, it'd be hard to find that patient one. All that would be very difficult for me to do. There wouldn't be, I couldn't do it through Google. I couldn't do it through Facebook. I couldn't do it through the internet because you couldn't find that person. So I just say it's difficult for you to sift through and find the truth. Now, if the incident is here, and for lack of better, of the hands up, don't shoot, there you can go literally and go and look and find out, well, what does the police report say? What does the video say? Right. I mean, you have access to independent information and say, listen, did Murdoch, was he there? Could you hear Paul's voice in the background?
Have you been watching that the trial / Netflix series?
My sweet wife got sucked in, and she's.
I've seen only one episode of the trilogy.
Oh, have you been following the Murdoch trial at all?
A little bit, not much.
Not the trial. I saw the HBO documentary.
Oh, it was HBO. Okay.
Well, there is one on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
Before Netflix, there was HBO.
Oh, gotcha.
We binged the Netflix.
Okay.
Of course, I know a lot of people in that county, and I know folks that live there.
In the Low Country.
When the situation happened, I printed out the story for you, and you didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, what the hell, Kevin?
Well, not only that, I knew people that know them well. I know people that are connected with them.
Oh, dang.
I mean, well, first of all, undergrad at Furman, which is in South Carolina, which would be like in the state, it's just like in the state of South Carolina, the folks that kind of went into politics, they either went to Carolina, Clemson, or Furman, and depends on where they are from a intellectual standpoint. If they wanted to go into med school, typically went there. We had like 90% of med school. So a lot of the people, were there. Mark Sanford, of course, who's from near there, who served as the governor of South Carolina, ex-fraternity brother of mine, so knew those people been down there. No people who are still in that area and in that kind of high-ranking positions down there. So no people that know people. And it's a very, very small state, and everybody knows everybody. So, it is very, very interesting. Also, when it happened, and originally what brought to light, and anybody, we're talking about the Alec Murdaugh trial taking place in South Carolina right now, and I don't know where
It's pronounced Murdoch, right?
I think it's Murdaugh. Yeah.
Okay, I was confused.
It's spelled differently. But the
yeah,
Murdaugh trial.
Murdaugh.
And then you hear about Paw, and you hear about Buster, and you hear about, it's
Randolph.
It's a great story it's a great Southern story of sort of the patriarchy of that area and how much influence families have had in small towns across the South over generations.
I sometimes think of you in Clearwater.
Oh, come on.
The Hazel family in Clearwater.
It's not like the same. You'll be silent.
I mean, you're not evil or anything like that, but when I run into people, it's like, yeah, I taught Kevin about 50 years ago, man, him and his brother. Yeah, I'm like, what?
Well, hopefully he doesn't kill his kid and his wife. So
that's right. Yeah, they disappear. But if you all remember, at the same time, I handled a case here in Florida that was almost identical to Paul Murdaugh's boating accident.
I do. It was eerily similar.
So to really dissect it,
is that handled? Like, is it finished?
It's over. Yeah.
Wow.
So that case. So I'm just trying to, in my head, think about what I can talk about.
Sure.
And I want to talk what's been publicly talked about. So in that case I handled, took place in the intercoastal waterways of Pinellas County. The kids involved were coming back from a Halloween party.
And they were 16, 17.
Almost the same age as the Murdaugh.
Right.
And the huge difference was, in my case, there was zero. There was, in fact, evidence that showed that my client was not under the influence of anything. Complete zero. Versus the Paul Murdaugh case, where you have a cover-up of his impairment, intoxication. But eerily similar was the decedents in both cases were sitting in the exact same location on the vessel.
The
young women who died, they're both women about the exact same age, were both seated on the far right corner.
Similar types of boats, I imagine.
Similar boats, similar size, and they were seated in the exact same location in the vessel. And they both died of the same way.
Can you tell me exactly where they were seated again?
Where you would ever want to seat? You ever want to sit when you're on a boat?
So I know where not to sit.
So they were sitting, if you're going forward on a boat,
yeah, they
were sitting in the far back of the boat near the transom, and they were on the port side.
What is that? Is port right or left? Or?
Right. So that's where they're seated, in that side. So they were
on the right side?
In the far right side.
Okay.
And
noted.
And they were seated there, and they both got, as a result of the accident, in my case, hit a pole in the middle of this intercoastal, and all the force went forward. In their case, hit a bridge, same thing, and both died of blunt force trauma, and both were found by their Apple Watch, by the way, interestingly enough.
By the Apple Watch?
Apple Watch. Both had Apple Watches on, which is interesting. But both were tragedies, but in that case in South Carolina, when you saw Paul and his mom murdered, you thought of, in my mind at the time, until you knew more, you thought how interesting it was that maybe there was some sort of retribution for the death of the young lady, like the family hired somebody or killed somebody. That went through my mind when I saw it, until you saw and knew more about the evidence of the case, and then you found about the housekeeper who died. That was did you follow that, Anna?
Honestly, and I don't care that there's a spoiler or anything. I've only seen the first episode, so.
What happened a couple of years prior?
Was it Gloria?
Yeah, Gloria. What happened? Gloria raised Paul.
Right.
And what was interesting, she fell down on the steps of the home.
Fell down the steps.
Yeah, air quotes, fell down the steps.
Right.
And she died. And Alec Murdaugh had taken a policy on his home, a $5 million premise umbrella policy. And then what he did is he sued his own insurance carrier
Okay.
representing the personal representative of Gloria, settled it for, I think it was $4.125 million, and then kept every stinking dollar.
Whoa.
So none of the money got dispersed to the relatives, the children of Gloria, and then he didn't tell his law firm about it, and away he went. So even if he gets acquitted of this case right now, this double homicide, he's still looking at potentially the death of Gloria, ? There was a death of another individual, young man, that was killed near their property also.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, this plethora of financial crimes, which is a wide and deep number of cases there, which is very, very interesting.
Is his eldest son still alive? Buster?
Buster's alive.
Is he just alive and kicking, doing all right? Family kind of fell apart a little?
He was embroiled with the homosexual.
Yeah,
murder, right?
there was a homosexual young man that was killed that he was, I think, tied to in that investigation.
Right.
Buster was?
Buster was, yeah.
Okay. All right. I need to watch the rest of this series, clearly.
This is so intertwined,
Mm-hmm.
but it's Alex Murdaugh is more concerned about saving the family name than he was about anything else.
Than
but
the family members.
the family members, yes.
Why do you? All right. So say if he did kill Paul and his wife, do
Yes.
you think it was because like she was planning on leaving him and she had the son on her side?
Well,
the secrets.
Yeah, the secrets, dead men tell no tales. I think that you had an issue that he had the financial world was unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
He'd built this, this kingdom of toys and trips and stuff that need to be fueled by money.
Status and power.
And that he had to feed that beast. And I think that his law profession was not doing it. So he slowly started embezzling. That led to debts, which led to issues. The death of Gloria, which I think, fueled part of his debts and lifestyle with that. And then you had now the boat, which was going to put him in a position of having to settle a civil case.
You know what would probably happen, at least this is just obviously a speculation, but because the youngest son, Paul, was such a liability, like remember he ran into the ditch and
Yes.
then the boat. And again, I've only seen one episode, so those are all the examples I have. But it seemed like he was such a liability, he kept getting in trouble. He was like, I got to get rid of this kid. And the mom probably was like, sticking up for him, I imagine, as a mother would do.
Or that she was, at least, again, this is me trying to get information from Netflix, ? Come on. I know, but I mean, or what I read. I mean, and again, I don't know these sources, the bias sources.
Sure.
But even in the town, the scuttlebutt was that the family was connected to the death of the housekeeper.
Okay.
So it's very, very interesting. But here's a question: do you? And I can't imagine as a father being in a position. Now, I'm saying killing your wife's one thing, and I'm not promoting or saying that can happen. But
right.
if you look back over time,
sure,
there's a million stories in the Naked City of husbands killing their wives.
It's not uncommon.
It's in fact
I wouldn't say it's common, but it's not uncommon. It happens. Crimes of passion, or
but let's put it this way: when there's a death of the spouse, the first person that's looked at is the husband or the wife.
Right.
Always.
Of course.
First.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing, and I'm saying that I can't imagine ever doing that, but it happens.
Right.
The death of your son.
Biological. That's an important distinction. But yeah.
That's very, very difficult to understand.
Well, when you got another one though, so it's like
it's not like
two.
It's not like a hound dog.
Yeah.
It's not the same. No, it's not. That to me, I can't. That's the part that I can't understand, especially
just evolutionarily, biologically.
That I don't see that, because until you have a child, you don't realize that you can love something that much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. It is not a romantic love. It's this agape love where you kind of go, it's unconditional, and you can't describe it until you get there. Mm-hmm. And you look at all the stories of the history of time where parents have died for their children.
Sure.
not to be religious, but I mean, but over, like, take me, don't take my son. Take me, don't take my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Where they would do anything that parental instinct kicks in.
But think the Murdaugh though, like this is a generational family where it's his Alex Murdaugh's father and then his grandfather. So it's like there's this prestige and legacy that's really important to him. So now you have two sons. You got one who's kind of all right, but then the other one's just messing up over and over again.
Well, Buster's not all right. Buster was caught for
Kinda all right.
Well, he was caught for plagiarizing in law school and kicked out.
Plagiarizing. I'm saying he didn't steal.
He didn't kill someone on a boat.
Well, yeah, it's like pretty. It's how pretty interesting this is.
Uh-huh.
I'm saying something that's like a really big deal. It's nothing. They didn't whack somebody.
Plagiarizing.
I know, but I mean, you talk about bringing shame to the family.
Sure.
No one's gonna remember plagiarizing. Oh, did you hear about Buster that plagiarized?
Well, he would be the only Murdoch that did not become a lawyer.
There's other things you could do that's still powerful in that county.
I know, but using your
Is this
theory,
before or after the youngest one killed the girl on the boat? Because maybe that got a little overshadowed. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the order. But here's the weird thing. So we were in Greenville last weekend at our South Carolina place, and we're walking down Main Street, and Missy goes, we're probably taking the same steps that Murdochs have taken. Because you like we're going to restaurants that like you would go if you're that person to do their thing. I wonder if they sat in the seat. But it's like so interesting when you think about it that way. But it's like, and she's like convinced me at one point, let's drive down and watch the trial. But it's very fascinating, and it just goes to show you as a society things that we're drawn to. We're drawn to law and order, whodunit crimes, and we're drawn to medical situations. I mean, I think we're kind of like those shows, those movies never get old.
Mm-hmm.
And a good courtroom, whodunit, question mark, fall from grace. I mean, this is not true, but there was a rumor going around that one of the folks who snuck into the back of the courtroom with a yellow pad was John Grisham, the author who wrote, Time to Kill.
Wait, snuck into the back of what courtroom?
The Murdoch trial.
Really?
Like he was going to use that as the basis of his next book.
Okay.
So they're like, do you know who was in court this year? John Grisham drove over from Oxford, Mississippi. But because it's like such a, like that, there's no way this could happen.
Well, it's such an anomaly, like you were saying. People can't really make sense of killing your own kid. Like you said, you're like, okay, you kill your spouse, like that's one story, but to kill your own child, your own offspring that obviously are half of you genetically speaking. And then you think it's not like you're killing them when they're infants, like you're killing them after you've invested 20 something years in them. Seems a bit odd. You talk about the sunk cost fallacy. You're like, well, even if you're a bad investment, I'm going to invest in you for the rest of my life because you're my freaking kid. So I think people are interested in cases where people do crazy things like kill their own kid or even suicide. I mean, I've studied evolutionary biology, and suicide was kind of this like evolutionary biological quagmire because scientists couldn't figure out why someone would actively take their own life, especially when they weren't, a terminal patient or in immense pain, at least physically. It didn't make sense to just off yourself because everything you do is in an effort to survive and reproduce. So things like that, I think, interest the public.
Well, yeah, and I think this goes to the base where someone says, I could never think of killing my own son. You get drawn into the story because it's a story of power. Mm-hmm. It's a story of history. Mm-hmm. It's a story of pedigree. It's a story also of a rise and fall. Mm-hmm. And as you know, anytime there's a story, especially of a public figure, a preacher, an NFL player, a local prominent figure, we as people are drawn, and I don't want to say like to see, but we sort of enjoy watching those people fall from grace. Right. And that
how the mighty have fallen.
And just watching that, and then you're nudging your spouse or your friend, see, they're no better than you or I. I mean, that's where you want to go with that. And I think this story, especially, you kind of go, damn, Murdochs. You're like, they keep getting this and they getting this, and their kids goes to this school and he does this and he's at this, and they're going down catching billfish and they're driving this boat and they get to make these decisions and they get pulled over and it goes away and so there's finally when it gets layered back, you go, yeah, they had a
Justice.
they had a horrible
Karma.
marriage. They had a horrible marriage, or
Yeah.
he hated her, or he's just a drunk, or yeah, he's a cheater. I mean, all those things, they want to see that. Almost if you go back to Elizabethan time when you saw the folks that put their heads in stocks and they threw tomatoes and potatoes at someone's head,
Yeah.
the public shaming
Right.
and having this pulled back for everybody to see. And now the new stocks and the new hangsman nooses and the no public executions, the modern day execution of a person is a Netflix series
Yeah.
that takes them down one episode after one binge-worthy episode at a time, because that's how it happens now, right?
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. It's the same concept. It's a different delivery mechanism. But, I mean, I think that regardless of what happens, and I think it's going to be pretty difficult for him to be acquitted. But it's very interesting.
He's claiming innocence, right? I honestly haven't been following it that much.
Yeah, he took the stand for 2 days, and his story was meandering, to say the least. Had it
Shouldn't
not,
he known better not to do it to take the stand, or he didn't have a choice?
or remember what Billy Shakespeare said, he was a fool for a client.
Okay.
He was advised not to testify.
Right.
But here's the
Shouldn't he
problem.
know better?
Here's the problem with people with machismo.
Okay.
People that have that sort of self-entitled, I'm the smartest guy in the room feeling.
Okay.
They always think that they can go and take the stand, and they've convinced enough people in their life of things that were shady. They've convinced people to take things that they knew were probably not in their best interest. They have been salesmen and peddlers and merchants of lies for years and deception, and they believe because of their persuasive salesman-esque carnival barkerism that they can take this show on the road, and I can convince 12 people of anything. And they kind of think that. And those are the people. I'm reminded, I had a trial that I prosecuted, 20 years ago, and it was this ring of people in Pinellas County that were moving 50 kilos of cocaine a week in Pinellas County, the largest cocaine distribution of any time in the history of the county. And it came from Colombia. Colombia went to Texas.
Your favorite place.
Yeah, it was. And then it went to Texas, Texas to Miami, and Miami it came up to Pinellas County.
Mm-hmm.
And they had this whole, how it worked, and mules, and this one individual came, and we were trying him in a cocaine trafficking case. And early on in the case, we had a bond hearing for him to be released on his own recognizance. He got released on a $250,000 bond. And part of what his argument is that he was a cocaine addict, and that he couldn't have done this. He was a mere pawn in this, and that he had used cocaine, but that was a deal. So that was about a year before our trial, and he took the stand, and his team told him not to take the stand, not to do it. And all of a sudden, he took the stand, and choir boy-esque, I never did this, never did that. And I said the first question out of my mouth was, what did it feel like the first time that you held cocaine in your hands? Of course, his response was, I've never used cocaine. I've never possessed cocaine in my life. I said, you want to think about that? And he goes, I've never. And I said, remember when you're, and of course, then I had his, I used, this is what I did. And of course, that was it. It was over. When he came out with that, instantly every juror does the classic cross their arms. We went 3 hours in cross-examination. And then, of course, it went really downhill. The problem was people who think that they can talk themselves out of it never seem to listen to the professional advice from the lawyers that know more about what they do every day than that person who's doing it for the first time. And it's really tough to talk a client who has an elevated opinion of themselves into doing what's right for them.
All right, let me ask you this.
Sure.
When it comes to that mindset, do you think part of it would be, so say if I accuse, I can't do that.
Go ahead.
No, because it just wouldn't make sense. But do you think that part of the reason why you want to testify on your own behalf, it would be, like, if you really are innocent, would be you would regret not taking a stance and just telling your side of the story?
There are people that are really good at testifying.
Okay.
And I'll give you this example. So we mock tried this case 8, 9, 10 times when Bubba was accused of killing a hog. And initially my thought process was I didn't want him to testify. But when he testified, we were exponentially better on explaining it. Because you take a person who talks for a living, right? Because that's what they do every day.
Right.
And they sparred with the best, which is if you do stand up and you're really good at it, you'll never be taken advantage of from a drunk patron on the first row, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to always school them because you've learned by baptism by fire how to respond to that person. When you've done radio call-in for 30 years and you've handled every hot mic, every hot phone call, every person's bring you down, and you're used to that dodge, parry, spin, thrust, you've got it down. It's hard to catch you or trip you up because you've lived in that world. And on cross-examination, it was like nothing. There was like no gloves landed. He got to unpack it in such a way that made sense. He was emotional at the right times, sort of, icy at one point, responsive. I mean, it was all well played because a trial is a theatrical performance when it's done well. And you've got to find the essence of genuineness and pull it out of witnesses so that when a jury is judging someone by their verbal and nonverbal, the way they testify, that they go, I believe that person. So there are people that are really good at testifying and that without a doubt I've seen sway a jury because they are so connective. But it's hard to explain that, and it's hard to teach that, and it's hard to, but you've got to have a good sense that person's going to be able to respond well, during cross-examination and not lose it, that they're going to be able to get their story across to a jury who wants a reason to believe them, but they're going to want to hold their hat on the way that they acted, the way they responded, the way they were truthful, the way they were evasive, the way they were, non-invasive, the way they accepted, the things they had to accept. Like, is it true you did this? Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I did. But let me tell you why, But when you fight them at every step of the way, that's when jurors go, I don't know if I believe that. Just like you're listening to someone who's trying to sell you something. If they're trying too hard, you're not buying what they're selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I think we got someone online.
Yes, we do. They've been waiting for some time. Sorry. Hello, who's this? You're on Kevin's Law.
Yes, Mark the Frog.
Mark the Frog.
Hey.
Mark, how are you, my friend?
Pretty good. Welcome back, everyone. It's nice to have you back on the air.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a little while. We're busy.
Yeah, so I'm sorry you didn't win the election, but I hope you'll run again.
Well, Mark, it's kind of like you do an ultra marathon. I think you never ask someone when they get done with them what you're going to do next. I guess you never ask a woman who delivers triplets when are they going to have babies again. It really was. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I learned so much. Met a lot of great people. Met people I would never have met otherwise that live in my own town. Learned a lot about a system that I had a pretty good knowledge of that now I have a really good knowledge of. And it's a fascinating world. And it's just like going into a different, it's just a different world. It's like, if you're going to go into, NASCAR, you learn it's a whole different world. And you go into whatever that is, and you may know a lot about it as a fan. It's different when you get involved as a player. And I certainly learned a lot about that way and learned in a hurry. I was drinking through a fire hose. And I gotta say, I worked really, 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 really hard. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And it was good, but it was still a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a good learning experience, I guess. It's something to put on your baggage.
Well, I think I would have been I would have probably been. I don't think I could have been happy had I not done it. I mean, it would have been things that would always gnawed at me. And I think that, I think I tell my kids to do uncomfortable things, put themselves in uncomfortable positions, take on things that are not necessarily what they enjoy to do every day. And when you do those things that I think are stretching yourself, regardless of what it is, whether it's physically, if you're going to run a marathon, or, you're going to invest in something that you don't, you're like, oh, there's a lot to invest in this thing. But unless you take some sort of risk, you're going to end up being in the same place, a comfort zone. And there's not enough that really happens in the comfort zone. And I think you got to put yourself in uncomfortable positions.
Okay, I started watching that show on Netflix last night.
What do you think, Mark?
Well, I got to watch episode number 3 tonight about the Gloria. That'll be the one I'll be watching after you're done your show there.
Well, good. Well, I'd like to get your take on what you think about that. That's interesting. They didn't do it. I don't think they gave it enough depth and breadth. I didn't see the HBO one. I watched the Netflix one. I'll probably want to watch the HBO one.
The HBO, they spent a lot of time talking about that first case not the first case, but the woman who was killed on the boat.
Yes.
Just a reaction from the friends when they were arrested, and everyone, the emphasis that they kept putting on was the power that the Murdochs had in that county.
That must be similar to the Netflix one, because the Netflix is very similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, big time. I think the whole family's shady, going back to the great-great-grandfather in 1910 that started it all.
Well, I don't know about that, but but it certainly was interesting to have it dissected. Of course, then I don't know how honest HBO or Netflix is in their representation of what happened. You could see the videos of before Paul got behind the wheel of the boat before crashing. You could see that. You heard the testimony, or at least the words of the friends.
Right.
I think that was pretty powerful. So I don't know if it was cut up, but if you listen to those folks, their words were pretty strong on the way that they felt about the way that he acted. And I don't know how much of that was coached or not coached, but if you haven't seen the Netflix series or the HBO, I didn't know about the HBO one, I would encourage you to check it out. The live trial is probably better than fiction, and that's fun to watch. And I don't know where they are. I think that the prosecution was going to call some other witnesses. I think it'll get to the jury by Friday, and that will certainly be interesting. But of course, this doesn't really solve anything for Alec Murdoch, because he then is looking at multiple financial charges after this. So there's really no end for him other than a life prison sentence. And I think that's where he'll end up.
Is the trial over with now? Or is it
No, it's still going on. Still going on.
I just got a notification about it.
Go ahead.
Testimony ended in Alec Murdoch's murder trial. The jury is set to visit the site of the killings tomorrow.
Great. So I think you have closing arguments probably maybe the first of next week. I don't know if they're going to give it to him before the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably, if I was the judge trying to run it, I would finish up this week with testimony and jury viewing, get the jury instructions, and then do closing arguments probably, on Monday, and then give it to him next week. Although he might say, listen, I just want to get it over with, and try to cram it down, which they could do. But if they do that, then tomorrow's Wednesday? No, they probably do that. Do closing arguments on Thursday and Friday, and then give to the jury, and then they start in the weekend, and away they go.
So I picked up a load of eyeliner seafoods in Nova Scotia, like the frozen fish sticks, a full load of that.
Wow.
Awesome.
I hope there's no crash.
I'm past Montreal, but I have to stop because as of January 1st, they voted for the new electronic logbook in Canada, so we have no choice but to abide by it.
Wow. Well, Mark,
thank you.
Well, Mark,
yeah, I got to stop right now.
No worries. Well, Mark, I appreciate it. Thanks for calling in. I hope you're safe. Great talking with you, and thanks for giving us a shout.
Drive safe, Mark.
Anna, one more thing. Can you make sure Bubby posts that Kevin's show on Bubba Army Radio?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks,
No
Mark.
problem. Have a good night. Bye.
Mark's great. We got one other person.
No, we're
Good.
good
There
right
is
now.
one topic I wanted to get your
Go
opinion
shoot.
on,
Ooh.
because I don't know too much about it, and I didn't really follow the story. But were there Chinese balloons hovering over United States and got shot down?
that's so interesting. And I followed the story a little bit.
So you didn't really pay too much attention to it either.
I didn't. Anna, did you pay a lot of attention to it?
Probably more than you guys, but not as much as Blitz. I don't know if he's here right now, but he can definitely chime in on this one. I believe the one that they shot down over South Carolina was actually a Chinese balloon, and then the next three, remember there was like one over Alaska, one over somewhere in Canada, and then one over Montana that they shot down. I don't believe those were Chinese balloons.
Did they
Those
have
were just like private entities.
any Wuhan bats in them?
I don't think so. And if Blitz is here, he can chime in on it, but he was certainly following this very closely. Because he likes everything to do with the space,
So,
including balloons. So.
one of the arguments is that while the United States has been talking about which gender can go in which bathroom and who's going to be able to participate in which Division I sport, that the Chinese have stayed out of wars for the last 3 decades, and that they built their infrastructure, and they are plotting their plan for global world domination. And if you read, and I'll get your thought on this,
Yeah.
that the balloons was both a figurative and literal test of America's resolve, because they wanted to know what the reaction would be, because
do about it.
they're constantly testing to find out what the reaction is going to be
Limits are.
psychologically, militarily, politically, so that when, not if, when they go into Taiwan, what is the response going to be based upon the party in power?
Right.
Are they going to marshal, efforts? Are they going to just let them go? I mean, what's going to happen?
I think they're kind of using Ukraine as a proxy for that.
I think you're right.
So.
And the question is, what's the appetite?
Can you explain that a little bit more? What is that like? How are they connected?
Well, so the argument right now is that you have Ukraine, which is battling Russia. Now, I understand there's the theory, which is Russia would say, well, that's our property. We want it back. The other argument is, well, there's an independent Ukraine and Russia can't come in there and take it over. But what you're saying, the proxy war, is that you've got NATO powers, including the U.S., which are supplying things, which would be including intelligence, training, arms, weapons, specific weapons, the javelins to take down the tanks, because the Russian army is light from an aerial standpoint, and they believe in a strong ground game. They had, I think, at some point, was it 4,000 tanks? And I have to ask Duncan Punkin about this. That they are a strong tank country. They believe in a infantry kind of overtaking of a country, and the javelin was the weaponry by which we provided the Ukrainians and whoever else is there fighting alongside the Ukrainians, the Mercs or whoever's there, whoever's paying those people to be there, to start destroying the tanks. And as that happened, it slowed down their invasion. So you go back as an analogy to Afghanistan, where Russia came in, and then Charlie Wilson, if you follow that movie, came in and then provided, the
Mujahideen,
with the ability to shoot down the helicopters, which were killing the Afghanis, and then it provided them cover, and they could take them down, and they had the shorter held missiles to bring them down, and that created the ability to put Russia in a slow drip process of death, defeat, and deficit. So that became until finally Russia took their ball and went home, certainly not declaring a win. In Ukraine, you've got this war between China, who is bolstering Russia with, arms, intelligence, ability to stay in power to fight, and you've got NATO and the U.S. doing the same thing in Ukraine. So you've got a war that one would on the surface say is between Ukraine and Russia, which on the world stage is an argument between NATO and U.S. and China and Russia. And the question is really, what is the staying power, or are American people going to stomach our continued support of Ukraine, or are we going to withdraw our money and everything else we've been to prop them up? And if so, would that allow Russia and with China's help, to march through Ukraine. If that happens, what does that mean for the rest of the world?
I think it's also important because
does that wrap it up right?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I was accused while at home during winter break of being a Putin sympathizer, which I don't really identify as such. But I kind of made the point that it's from the outsider's perspective, it's like, oh my God, we got this crazy dictator, and he's trying. Everyone is Bubba, by the way, including my mother.
Wow.
We got this crazy dictator.
Straight that voice.
Yeah. Whenever I try to impersonate anybody from any country of any gender or whatever, it's always just Bubba.
You're like the female Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah, pretty much. But it's not just about some crazy dictator that, out of nowhere decided to invade this country. And, at first it's Ukraine, and then it's Poland, and then it's the rest of the world, and then it's the U.S., like global domination or something like that. We really do have to take history into context and kind of look back and go, okay, well, how did this get to the point where it's at now? And, I mentioned this when you were on the show a couple weeks ago about the promise that was in writing and also verbally between Bush and Gorbachev or Boris Yeltsin. I think it was probably Gorbachev that, once the USSR dissolved in 91, that NATO wasn't going to move 1 inch to the east of Germany. And I think since then there's been 16 countries all to the east of Germany that have joined. A lot of the Balkan states, Romania, Bulgaria, Slovenia, Slovakia, all those countries have joined in, kind of closing in on the Russian sphere of influence. And I think it's also important to note that, a fifth, 20% of the Ukrainian population does not identify as Ukrainian. They speak Russian. They're ethnically Russian. There was a referendum in 2014 in the Donbass or the Donetsk, one of those regions, Kevin, the ones on the east. And 89% of them, again, you could debate sources, but what I've seen is 89% of those people said, we don't want to be part of Ukraine anymore. We're not Ukrainian. We're Russian. We speak Russian. Everything about us is Russian. And after, the USSR dissolved, a lot of kind of random arbitrary borders were drawn, much like countries are, where it kind of doesn't really make sense, where you have ethnic groups that are divided and others that are put together. So, you take all those things into consideration. In addition to NATO continuously moving east and now possibly before this conflict considering allowing Ukraine to enter NATO, I mean, it's not like this was an unprovoked war that nobody saw coming, is what I'm saying, I guess. So I don't think that Putin is crazy, and I do think that this was a provoked war, and I think there were many things we could have done to prevent this from happening. But then, now we try to be like, oh, this poor tiny nation of Ukraine, we need to make sure that they don't fall to big bad Russia because big bad Russia invaded for no reason. So I just feel like the narrative, much like other things that we've been fed by the media, is incorrect and incomplete, I would say.
I agree with what you're saying.
Right. That was kind of a long one.
No, I like that. But, as Reagan would say, there you go again.
Sorry.
Well, no, I don't mean that by that, which is, there you are throwing out some facts and some logic and some agreements, and it doesn't fit the narrative of 2022.
Or 23.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say, but when it happened.
Sure, yeah.
But which is, this is it's what's going to be also interesting is that I'm going to digress and come back. So I'm really looking forward because the countries that were the east of Germany, the line drawn.
Yeah.
Those are the only countries I'm going to in 8 days or 10 days, which is
NATO countries.
No. I mean, I'm saying, I'm sorry that would be, so I'm going to go to Croatia, which was former Yugoslavia,
right?
Montenegro, Serbia, will be next to Slovenia, through Hungary, through Krakow, and of course Hungary in Prague. So
what are the odds? Like your whole life, you haven't gone through those countries. You've gone to Colombia, you've gone to Africa.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, you know what? Well, I need to go to that country that's right by that war over there. Let's go check. Let's go on a tour over there.
Yeah. He already did spring break in Kabul, so now he's got to go to,
Yeah, what's wrong?
I have the breath of a lion on my neck. I can.
Well, one of the things, and I was there pre-wall coming down to Dachau. Have you been to Dachau at all?
Mm-mm.
So Dachau is one of the prison camps, yeah.
Concentration
camps. And I remember being in November of 83 on a dark, cold day. And it just, you know, I've talked about when you walk on the campus at West Point and Naval Academy, you get chills because you know who's walked there before you. I mean, you feel good. I remember being walking on the field there at Notre Dame where you kind of go, wow. I mean, there's certain places where I feel like the ground speaks to you. I was in Dachau prison camp, and you felt death. You felt the coldness. You looked around and you're going, oh my gosh, you're just overwhelmed when you think about what's happened there.
Right.
And I think it's important, just like Eisenhower did after World War II ended, where he demanded that we came in and photographed the prison camps because he said years from now, people will say this didn't happen. And that's so important. And we're going to go to Auschwitz. And I think it's really
important. You're going to go in a couple of days?
I'm going to leave. Yeah, I'm going to go to Auschwitz, which is outside of Krakow. And I want to see it not because it's anything that's going to bring me joy.
No. But
I think it's important that we visit places so that we educate ourselves so that we try not to make the same mistake twice.
Right.
We talked about that before, that there are people currently in the United States, when you talk to them about 9/11, that they call it a hoax and it didn't happen the way that it happened, that no one died. You know, those are things that we need to somehow, put together and say, this can happen. This is why this happened. We need not to try to make the same mistake twice in our lives. I'm reminded my oldest son, Logan, who got married, which I'll talk about that wedding second, which is awesome. But, he worked at a company before in Texas, and they had turnover in the company about every 2 years, and they go back to a problem they've had, and he would laugh about it because the solution to the problem was the same solution that was given 2 years ago that didn't work, and he would explain why it wouldn't work. So he'd stand up, and they'd say, well, let's do it this way, and he would go, well, if we did this is going to happen, this is going to happen, this, and they go, you must be brilliant, because he knows what's going to happen already. So when you go to places like Dachau, when you go to places like Auschwitz, when you go to countries and you say, well, this is what's happened, when we talk about, this is why socialism doesn't work, a lot of people go, well, I think we should give it a try. And you got people who literally have lived in those countries and go, I'm here to tell you, this is how it ends.
Yeah, you talk to anybody that was part of the USSR.
I've got a spoiler alert for you. This is how it ends. This is why this is a really, really bad idea. And I don't know why we as a civilization, as humanity, as a species, has to continue to repeat these problems over and over again, because as you said at the beginning of the show, history has a way of repeating itself. And you've got to be aware of those stories and those lessons that it's taught us. And a lot of people don't learn that.
Well, kind of tying it into what you said about Alec Murdoch, trying to keep it all together here.
Wow.
Where someone may feel that they themselves are the chosen ones, the ones of higher angels that listen. I know Mao tried it, didn't work, Mussolini or whatever, if you're into communism or fascism or whatever. But listen, we're going to do it right, Kevin, this time, because guess what?
Gosh.
I'm in charge, and you have this hubris that, you're going to do it the right way.
Right.
You're not going to be corrupted by greed or power or status, that somehow, you're somehow, you're like Teflon. That's like Teflon to you. That's not going to stick to you. You're going to be able to get away with it. You're going to be able to pull it off the way that nobody else could. And then you find yourselves in very similar situations to people of the past. So,
there's this sort of thought process by these people, and I say these people that don't understand the mistakes that history has taught us, that we realize how bad socialism is and how it is a slippery slope, that ultimately the reason it fails is that we are humans. And let me explain that. We will always move, and our default will be what's best for us. And if we're not rewarded with hard work, we will not do hard work. If we're rewarded with apathy, we will be apathetic. A great example of that, and the best way that I can explain to people about why that works, is the shopping cart. And before you go, if you lost your mind, let me explain this. There are no rules when you go to Home Depot. There's no rules when you go to Kmart. There's no rules when you go to Walmart. There's no rules when you go to anywhere Publix that says if you fail to return your shopping cart, bad things will happen to you. In fact, you're not really even shamed for it. But there is a sort of decency that says if you use a shopping cart, rather than leave it in the middle of a parking lot where you might hit with your car, it might ding somebody else, or it might be a runaway cart that's going to hit your car, that you use the common courtesy and you take your shopping cart and you put it back in that little bin because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
That describes, if you looked at a parking lot of any shopping center, any business, any box store, USA, that explains to you why socialism will not work. Because there are lazy people, and there's no right or wrong here, because you're asking people to do the right thing and people won't, and they don't.
Well, here's the thing about socialism and about what you said about motivating people, and I agree with you. You know, you say, hey, everyone's going to get this amount of pay no matter how hard you work. Obviously, people aren't going to work as hard. The thing that I've been learning a lot about Mao. I've been doing a deep dive into Mao because I realized I didn't learn a lot, and there was kind of a black hole, a little bit of a gap in my knowledge when it came to Chinese history. So in the last week, I've been really trying to learn a lot about Chiang Kai-shek and Mao and his ascension into power and stuff like that. But, you know, people are motivated by rewards, but they're also motivated by fear. So, like, if you tell someone, like, hey, you better make this amount of grain or wheat or cultivate this amount of steel or whatever the case may be, or you're gonna die, people also work pretty hard. So I think that there's kind of multiple ways to motivate a population to get into motion, and I think that's what people like Mao and Stalin tried to accomplish, by fear.
But that's exactly by force.
They were not. By no means were they successful, although initially Mao wasn't entirely unsuccessful. Like, I learned that education got a lot better, Medicare, medical resources got a lot better initially, but then when he started doing things like the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution and things like that, he just got too his aspirations got too big, and it was not able to come to fruition because of physics. It wasn't going to happen, and a lot of people were punished for not making, I read stories about peasants, burning their own wheelbarrows just to create some sort of steel that they would be able to submit to, the person who was in charge that had to report to Mao in order to avoid being, executed or something like that. So.
And of course, like every story, you like to take the really good parts and you exclude the bad parts. It's no different than if you talk to someone right now and said, well, look at the Scandinavian countries. See, I'm using the same thing. I'm using Jim Gaffigan voice. Look at the they fail to report the fact that it's really very, very difficult to be highly successful in a Scandinavian country because they push everything to the middle. And they talk about, they go, well, they've got free education. Well, the tax rate is through the roof. And it's really not a situation. So if you want to be in a place where there is a lot of everybody looks the exact same, you don't have the opportunity to create a company in your basement and do whatever you want to do, then there are places for you in the world. The problem is, or the benefit of this country is that you literally can do whatever you want and you can be wildly successful if you want to work at it. I mean, where else can the Catch Me Outside girl make $50 million showing her skin on OnlyFans? I mean, there's a rags to riches story. I mean, it's sad in a lot of ways.
Is it?
I think it's sad. I mean,
what's sad about it?
It's sad because, I think that, that's not what I'd want for someone that I was related to. But, my goodness, I mean, my position on that is I give her credit. She did it. And I think that we have, to tie it back to the Murdoch argument, we as people always want to take pot shots and we want to criticize. It's not fair. There's people like, how many houses does Steve Jobs need to have? I mean, the answer is as many as he wants.
Right. Because
he came up with a great idea and he was able to execute. If you execute a great idea, I'm not going to come to your house and take your stuff. I'm not going to ask for 50% of what you make because you're highly successful and work very hard. So you shouldn't do the same for me because a lot of the way that's theft. But we've got a country where you can be wildly successful, do what you want, and you get to reap the benefits of those rewards. But you have a lot of people in this country that ideologically think that that's not fair, that I should have what you have, but I'm not going to do the work. The great analogy of that, and I was having the conversation with my middle son, and his argument, he's a big worker outer, was this. He said, Dad, I'm not going to give people a workout routine anymore because he's really good at creating a personalized workout to get you in great shape. I said, why? He goes, I did this for probably 50 people. And he goes, of those 50 people, only one person ever followed my work. I spent hours.
Was he paid?
No, he just did it because he loved.
Because if he's paid, like, who cares?
No, but he's doing it for the love of working out.
Oh, okay.
And he says, why do I give it to them? They're just gonna, they're gonna blow it. They're not gonna do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the argument a lot of times when I, create some videos like, this is the best way to do this, or I say that this is how you can be highly successful. Start buying some investment property. It just takes a couple $1,000s. Just put a couple $100 away in some cryptocurrency, or just, get 8 hours of sleep, or just get up in the morning and start this side hustle of doing this. Spend a little time, or to your point, spend a little time reading things that are not People Magazine or something else. Try to learn about history, or spend some time listening to a good podcast on investing, or listen to a podcast upon health, or all these things. And people go, especially if I do it in the legal world, they're going, why would you give away all this free legal advice? Why would you tell people how to be successful in their law practice or how to be successful in their life? You need to charge for that, because if you start doing this and you start doing all these videos and you start doing these podcasts and do these things right here, other lawyers are going to copy you, and they're going to be your competition. I said, let me explain this to you. I can give you the perfect workout, but you're not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the average person, there's all this great advice out there, and you can get it on the internet, even though there's, you're not going to have all the information. It's not going to be the Wild Wild West,
right,
on how to be wildly successful in 6 months on anything you want to do. But the problem is doing. And the average person, even though they're well-intentioned, just like me, the 9 o'clock Kevin is going to steer his way to Baskin Robbins, and it's going to be hard for him
Not when he has his protein shake, though.
But it's going to be hard for me to 12% body fat because I'm fighting myself.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what I said in the show the other day. Probably the greatest or the perfect definition of hell is if you were invited to a room to visit you if you were living your full potential.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because you think, if I only would have, got up at 4 a.m. and grind, if I only would have, had those great ideas that I had, if I would have put them to paper, if I only would have written that 7th novel that would have taken off, if I only would have done this thing that would have resulted in that. And there's a lot of stories about these people who tried, and that's why it's called 409 and not 408. And that's why it's WD-40 and not WD-39, is because it's that next second
right.
extra
LSD 25 and not LSD 24.
Yeah, that you went, but you went to that extra effort to do whatever that is.
Yeah.
And there's a million stories of people out there that put in that extra effort that got to them to what it is. There's a great story about this guy who said, I'm going to find my way to be a multimillionaire, and he started selling stuff online, and it wasn't until like his 56th product, which was literally like this whoopee, like this blanket that he did that mushroomed, it made him $1 million in a couple months. But he's like, that was the most stupidest thing I ever did. I never thought that would make it, but that was the thing that finally put me on the map, that now I've been able to build this, empire, because I did and went to that extra effort, because I kept trying as opposed to saying, this will never work, And it's just amazing that that's the effort that it takes to get there on whatever it is that you're trying to do. And, I listened a lot, or have listened a lot lately, and I never really was a Kobe Bryant fan. And not because I didn't like him, I just was never really a huge fan. And I always perceived he was a very, very talented basketball player, until you kind of peel back his work ethic. And that guy was a maniac. He would outwork everybody.
Right.
he had spent his off season working on stuff, and I remember watching videos of him, and he had trouble driving to the hoop and just got it because he didn't have enough weight on him, and he'd get beat up and get fouled, and he wouldn't make the shot. He hired these guys literally with these big old, things that were like football pads. He'd drive to the hoop, and they just beat the heck out of him until he was able to score, getting beaten. And then he got into a game his next season, and he was like averaging 50 points a game. And the reason was he's like, this was easy. My training was hard. Going into an NBA with these guys, that's hard. That's easy compared to my training. And it's like anything in life. And I think that a lot of us, we want to choose the easy way out. And sometimes the tough road is the way to go.
Sometimes it's the only road.
Yeah, because you grind it out, and that's how you find success.
Yeah.
But it's very, very, very tough, and it's hard to do. Like Rock, you've written, how many books have you written?
A lot.
A
lot.
And certainly you've like going, when is it going to break through, right?
Not really, not so much anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's awesome. I mean, for you to be in a piece, but a lot of people go, they're the.
When I was in my 20s, I had that goal mainly because I felt that was my best chance to, build a financial foundation so I could start a family, get out of debt.
Sure.
But then, as you know, I read the Bible, and I just took 2 years and I read it cover to cover, and it's like my priorities in life changed. I still write because that's just my passion in life.
Mm-hmm.
But between everything that's going on, like even when I heard like between Anna and I think that's awesome to be like looking into Chinese history. I think everyone should do that because the education system just deprived us of so much that's happened in this world. But then your cart analogy, even when I went grocery shopping this morning, when I put my cart up, it's not because it's the right thing. I'm just trying to help out the person whose job it is to collect the carts. And just having that compassion and consideration for others, which I think is missing in today's culture, I think that comes from a place, it comes from a morality or just a standard of what's right and wrong and what's good and bad. And a lot of people, they're not taught that. They don't, whatever, you want to do, whatever's good for you is good for you. In Scientology, that's what their mentality was. What's good for you is good for you. What's true for you is true for you. That was it. And I'm like, I don't know. Like I just, when I put my faith in the word of the Bible, just as I hear you talk about how messed up this world is, it makes me feel relieved and refreshed and know that, like, God, like I have been spared. Like even when you talked about, like, if you look at your best self, to me, I wouldn't be looking at me like, oh man, only if I should have, could have, I would be inspired. Like if I had saw myself like 16, 270 pounds, miserable in that place in Georgia, as you know, growing up, and I saw myself today, I'd be like, oh my God, I would probably be crying. Just
you would cry.
This is what I could do.
I know, but that's great. I mean, but my point is,
everyone's different, obviously.
Of course, you look at, and then we talked about before the study of like, if you really want to be successful, write your goals down.
Yeah.
And stare at them. Of course, here's my argument with that. One of my goals was to run for Congress. Don't write it down because you end up doing it.
Your goals change.
I do, but my point is,
that's an important point.
I literally had written that down as a goal to achieve, and I'm like, whew, that was a tough goal.
Was your goal to run for Congress or to win Congress?
Well, what was to run? I mean, I wanted to win.
Of course.
Okay, because you remember when you told me when I first started joining the law firm, right?
Yeah.
I just turned 24, so it was my first birthday with the law firm. And he caught me outside because I was just moping around because I had the expectation. I'm like, man, I should be a screenwriter right now.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me. He's like, hey, this is classic Kevin. I make fun of him. I imitate him a lot. But he said, hey, it's all right. All that means is that your goal. No, all right. So this isn't a knock towards the Congress. But I'm like, your goals were unrealistic. So you didn't say your goal was win Congress because obviously that's beyond your control. But to run for it and you did it. You accomplished your goal.
I certainly did.
But I mean, and it's like, man, I should have picked an easier goal. But I mean, but it's like, but my point is, when you literally write down your goals, and you talk about Charles Schwab. This is an interesting story, and I heard this the other day. Charles Schwab was very successful, obviously, and he paid this guy. He said, "Listen, if someone gives me really good advice, I'll pay him for the advice." This guy gave him some advice. He said, "This advice completely changed my life and changed the trajectory of my success." And he went back and paid that guy $500,000. And this was like in the 50s, which was a ton of money. And this was the advice. The advice was this simple. The guy told him, he said, here's what you need to do every day. You can write 6 things down on a piece of paper in priority to get things done. Write it down the night before.
Mm-hmm.
The night before, write it down. And the next morning, you take number 1. And you don't stop until you completed number 1. And after you do number 1, you do number 2, you get on a list. When you're done with 6, you start over again. That's the secret. And Charles Schwab goes, so this is BS. This is not going to work. He goes, just trust me. He did it. He powered through it. Eating the frog, did the most difficult thing first. Didn't stop until, didn't get distracted. Got that thing done.
Right.
Did the power move and got that thing done. And he goes, when he started doing that every day, because he always planned the night before.
Yeah.
He goes, when I did that, he goes, my life changed forever. He goes, that guy, I paid him $500,000 and it was worth every cent I gave to him. And just like we talked about writing written goals, which is a little different because that's like a daily thing, writing written goals, you are propelled toward those goals.
Yeah.
When you write them down, you are, all of a sudden the world starts moving you towards those goals, whether you like it or not. Now, I agree with you, Rock. Sometimes your goals change. I mean,
sure.
your goal might be at some point, to have 3 kids. But after you have 3 kids, I don't need 3 more. But whatever that goal is, and sometimes,
or they're just new goals.
They're new goals. You add on to
your goals.
You go, okay, I want to do this, and it's just really, really important. And I think we are in a position, we're in a society where we have the ability to do some amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just amazing things. There's never been a time in the history of this country that you can move towards a goal faster than right now, especially with the speed of the internet, where anybody can do anything.
Right.
If they really want to, and they can find a way to do it. Now we've got artificial intelligence, which is a whole other show to talk about that, which I'm leveraging into that, which is amazing right now, by the way.
Is it? I heard it's pretty sexist and racist, and there's a lot of stuff coming out.
Well, then you're listening to the wrong channels again. Again, the people are, you're getting your bad information. You talk to the person, bad information. But anyway, well, listen, I could keep going. I want to say, if you've been on the chat, because I've been watching because my computer died, thank you guys for tuning in.
Do you want to take, we have 2 people on the line.
Let's take these 2. We'll take these 2 calls and we'll wrap it up. Go ahead.
All right. You're on Kevin's Law. Who's this?
Hi, it's Brett in Illinois.
Brett in Illinois. Thank you for calling, Brett. Sorry, we went straight through without a break, and I didn't have control of that. But anyway, we kept talking. But Brett, what's happening?
No, everything's fine. I just happened to catch in on YouTube, and Kevin, I know you, but I'm amiss to say I don't know the other gentleman. So who is this?
This is Rock. So if you listened to Kevin's Law before, it's always been Rock, On, and I. Well, actually, always 12 years ago, it started with just. But Rock's been a part of it since the beginning. But it's Rock, On, and I, and Rock works with me, and he also writes, and he also has another job. So that's his voice if you hear it, and that's his face if you see it.
Okay. It's a pleasure to meet you, Rock. I haven't seen you or heard you before, but I wanted to get acquainted with you before I get into my question or my comment.
Sure, go ahead.
It's more of a political thing than it is a law thing. Kevin, I could talk to you for hours and listen to you. I like your perspective and your knowledge. But here's where I'm at as far as a political thing. I hope that I can articulate it properly. I'm a white male in the central Illinois area. Always typically lean towards the left side of the aisle. But the older I get, this is not a unique story, but the older I get, I tend to also find some benefit in the right side of the aisle for what that is. Here's my problem, though, recently. I feel like I am meandering through the desert with no direction because it seems that the left is going too far left and the right is going too far right. I want to be an educated voter, which I think that I am and have been. But what Babyface or Matroni had said the other day on the Brent and the Killer Bee show was that social media has been getting so much involved in skewing voters in the sense that headlines are thrown out there and not a whole lot of digging down into the nuts and bolts of things is getting read into. So I guess my long story has gotten longer, but my question is, what's the future here, man? Like, I feel like I'm sort of lost in the middle with no direction, and I'm not going to vote for somebody party specific. It just doesn't make sense to me. So,
I think. Let me.
You understand what I mean?
I think I do. But let me see how I answer your question. So, I think that and I can only speak from my view of the world because that's the only view I have. My view of the world is based upon what I perceive to be common sense. Common sense to you might be different than common sense to me. I believe in a couple things, and I believe that you should benefit from the fruits of your labor. And I am proud, and if someone works really hard and does well, I don't want to be jealous of that because I'm not. I'm like, that's awesome, man. Good job. When I see someone who's been wildly successful in a company, or they're wildly successful in a sport, wildly successful in whatever they're doing, my thought is that's just great. I'm glad you've worked really hard to do it. You deserve everything, and you deserve the benefit of your hard work. I also believe that in less government. I think that more government's bad. I think that anytime you rely on the government for anything, you get what the American Indians got. And that's not good. And I think that when you pull back from that, and I believe in strong states' rights, and that the states should control because they have a better understanding of what's going on in their local area as opposed to a national government. And I think the national government really their job is to do nothing more than to protect us with the military, and not be in the trenches of cultural issues that they need not delve in. But I think from the
federal government has also gotten they're starting to micromanage a lot of things, and I don't know whether that is the proliferation of polarization, and so it's just gotten people on both sides of the aisle. But I'm going to ask you one more thing, and I'm going to let you go and move on
Sure.
to the other caller. I'm glad I caught on to this tonight while I'm at home. Will you agree that as much as America is the land of opportunity, you can open your own business, you can do your own things, you can get a credit line and do all that. Will you or will you not say that sometimes that is skewed based on race? I'm not trying to paint you into a corner,
Sure.
dude. I'm really not. I'm really asking, you seem like a common sense dude.
Yeah,
you really do.
So you're exactly right. So let me answer your question. I appreciate it.
So let me just say this. Answer my question, but thank you very much for taking my call. And as long as this goes on, I will tune in and listen because I like to hear this conversation. So thank you. But I'll listen offline. But thanks, Kevin.
No problem.
All right, bye. Thank you.
Yeah, I can only go so far because Anna needs to get 8 hours of sleep. So, and I'll answer it the way that whether it's skewed by race, it absolutely there has been an attack at the level that I think is totally unfair, and has given an unfair advantage to some people in this country. And ironically, the attack has come from leftist, elitist colleges that have affected the trajectory of many people. And they have prevented a lot of people from being successful by opening up the doors to that private club of going to an Ivy League school because they have basically they've shut out, based upon race, part of good, hardworking Americans. And the people that have been targeted are Asian Americans. And there is a lawsuit that was taking place that Biden administration chose to ignore.
The Harvard kids.
Exactly. And it's very sad. And if you dig down, and this goes back to about 10 years ago, they opened a high school outside of Washington, D.C. that was the best of the best. It provided all AP classes, unbelievable resources, and they decided to open up that school and it was a double-blind, race-neutral. All the applicants, they didn't know their names. They just provided scores. That was it. And the problem was after about 6 to 8 years, it was 90% Asian Americans and Indian Americans. When I say Indian, meaning from India, not Native Americans. And they stopped it because those culturally, within their family, they believe that education and music, by the way, and arts was very important, and they instilled, through your example, through force and fear, and also carrot and stick, the excellence of their children.
Right.
And when you apply to an Ivy League school, what they did, if you were an Asian American and you came from LA and your mother was a crackhead and you got a perfect SAT score, they subtracted from your SAT score, which they use as a metric to get into that school, I think it was 80 points. If you were the son or daughter from two African American doctors in Chicago, you had points added onto your score, which gave you an unfair advantage. So the Asian American had points taken away. The African American child had points added.
Mm-hmm.
The Hispanic American had points added to a lesser degree, and the Caucasian was where they were. So there was an absolute history of discriminating against Asian Americans at the highest level of education in our country. And I think it was wrong, and I think it was unfair, and it hasn't changed. And I think that litigation was needed through the discovery process, which continued. That's how we learned of that. And I think it's wrong. So I think in 2023, the issue should be that you are who you are based upon you are. There's never been a better time. We're certainly, that's a racist action, and I think we shouldn't have racist action, even if it's deemed to be affirmative action. I think that's bad. I think it's bad for our country. And I used that example years ago when one of our airlines said, you'll be glad to know that in 2022, this was in 2021, that 50% of our pilots will either be, minorities or females. And someone tweeted back, how about just give me the best effing pilots? We should have the best of whatever that is.
Right.
If I suggested to you that there's not enough Eskimo Americans in
I don't think that's the term.
I
don't think, Kevin, you're going to get us banned.
Well, I don't know what's.
I think it's Inuit, which sounds like a racial slur, but I think that's the word.
Well, those who are the okay. Okay, I'll say, Americans in the NBA, you'd say it's crazy. We want the best people with the 3-point shot, right?
Yeah.
How about we use that as the standard, which is we don't care who you are.
A meritocracy, you're suggesting. I think that's a wild idea.
How about that, right? Who's the best? How about we do that, right? It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think that's the answer. Let's take our last call.
Actually, I think that's it. The other one hung up, so.
Wait, and I don't blame them. Listen, we're going to take our royalty-free music.
Yeah.
I think I can play my ending, can I? Because I think it's royalty-free.
I think it is. Hang tight. I did pull it up, Kevin.
Do you have the
Just give me a chance.
You pull it up.
Just give me a chance.
Who's the best? How about we do that?
Oh, no. No, I don't know what.
Can you get there?
You
can't. I can try to find it for you. Just because.
This edition of
there we go. You got it.
But it's playing like a reverb, and I don't know. Maybe this is it. I don't know.
We'll see what your skills are.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Kevin's Law.
I don't know. Is it possible you could play it from yours?
I can.
I don't know where the reverb is coming from.
I just want to just out of just sheer. Hold on.
He is an all-star.
No, hold on. Let me give it right here. I'll somehow get there just because I'll feel better. Here it is. Ready, go. Ready, and try this.
This edition of Kevin's Law
nailed it.
is over.
Yeah.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
Stay in touch with Kevin Hazlett at the Attorney to the Stars page on Facebook. Follow Kevin on Twitter at Attorney to the Stars. That's ATTY, 2, the Stars. The opinions expressed are not those of the BTLS Network or Radio IO. The information provided doesn't constitute an attorney-client relationship and is not intended to be legal advice. Each case is unique and the laws of each state vary. The hiring of a lawyer should not be based solely upon any advertising or website.
Shut up! My lawyer will hear about this.
Kevin's Law.
Kevin's Law.
On Radio IO.